folks, and welcome back to Conveyancing. This is video 3 in the video series for special conditions, and in video 1 we had a look at classification, in video 2 we had a look at construction and obligations, and in this final video we will have a look at avoidance and waiver. As I said, I'll give you a few examples at the end, but you can kind of flesh those out for yourselves really. So looking at the issue of avoidance. So generally speaking, this will crop up. I just fell in love with this little graphic. I'm sorry. He's definitely trying to avoid his obligations under the contract. So looking at the general principles here. So the first thing you need to do is work out whose benefit the special condition was inserted for. The general principle is that the party for whose benefit the condition was inserted will have the right to avoid the contract for non-fulfillment of that special condition, except if there's some other express provision otherwise. So if the condition benefits both, either party is going to be able to avoid the contract without the agreement of the other. Okay, so then you need to work out whether the date for fulfillment of the special condition is before settlement. If there is an intervening period between the date for fulfillment of the special condition and the date for settlement, then even if that special condition was inserted for the benefit of one party only, after the date of fulfillment of that condition has come and gone, either may avoid the contract from that time onwards towards settlement. Okay? A party who has actually caused the failure of a special condition cannot rely on that special condition to avoid the contract. And that harks back to just the general contract law principle, doesn't it? That a party can't rely on their own default to escape the contract itself, to avoid the contract itself. If there are any express requirements that must be complied with, for example, notice requirements, before you go ahead and or your client goes ahead and avoids the contract, then they need to do so. And failure to attend to those kinds of pesky procedural requirements can often land a client in very hot water indeed. Often they will constitute a repudiation, so you need to really be scrupulous about complying with all of the express requirements in relation to avoidance. Okay, so what about the express consequences as set out in the special condition? If the clause gives one party the right to avoid the contract, this is going to govern the situation between the parties, and that party will be able to go ahead and avoid the contract for non-fulfillment of the special condition. Now, if the special condition has not been fulfilled, but the party wants to effectively waive that special condition and complete the contract anyway, the other party can't then treat the contract as at an end, okay, because the right to avoid has been given to the other party expressly. If, however, the right is vested in both to be able to avoid the contract, either can certainly terminate without agreement of the other, as I've said before. However, the situation in relation to waiver is a little bit more complicated, and we'll unpack that in just a moment. If there are no express consequences set out in the special condition itself, in terms of time particularly, things can be a bit murky if there's no time and no consequences provided. So the way that it works really is that you're thrown back, as I said before, on this notion of the special condition having to be fulfilled within a reasonable time. The maximum time allowable will be as at the date of settlement. The contract has obviously got to be settled at a certain date, so the special condition will have to be fulfilled by that date at the last possible moment. the party whose benefit the clause was inserted for will have the right to waive or avoid that contract at that point in time. So a little murkier, but at the very latest it's going to be the date of settlement that the party whose benefit the clause was inserted for can waive or avoid the contract itself. Really, this is just a recap of what I said to you before, but I wanted to hammer home this concept for you. The notion of benefit and which party was to benefit from the special condition is super important, both in terms of termination and also in terms of the way that waiver will proceed in the circumstances. So normally it's only going to be the party who actually is intended to benefit from this special condition that will be able to avoid the contract for non-fulfillment. But if the date for fulfillment of the special condition is before settlement, say 2 weeks before settlement, and the date for that special condition passes, then obviously if, for example, the clause was inserted for the buyer's benefit, once that date for fulfillment passes, the seller has a clear interest in wanting to resolve the lingering uncertainty as to how that contract is going to proceed, whether it's going to proceed. Okay, so once the date for fulfillment passes, if that date is pre-settlement, either party will then be able to terminate that contract, even if the special condition was originally inserted for the benefit of, as I said in my example, the buyer. Okay, the seller has a legitimate right after the passing of that date to work out what they want to do with the contract, and at that point, once the date's passed, either party can terminate. Now, if it comes to the situation that I was just talking about in the previous slide, if the time for fulfillment actually expires on the settlement date, then you've got that clause that was inserted for one party's benefit operating right up until the point at which settlement is meant to occur. And because of that situation, you can't allow the other party to terminate pre-settlement or even at settlement. Okay, so if the time for fulfillment expires on settlement, only the party who benefits from that special condition is allowed to either waive or avoid the contract. So hopefully that seems a little clearer to you now, and hopefully the reason for it being this way is a little clearer for you now. So that is the issue of avoidance. And now we need to look at the issue of waiver. I like my little crocodile. So somewhat similarly to the position with avoidance of the contract, in terms of waiver, it will also be important to work out which party was intended to benefit from the special condition. The right to waive will depend on whether the condition was inserted for that particular party's benefit. If a special condition benefits both parties equally, then the waiver of that special condition will require the consent and cooperation of both parties. Okay, so that can be somewhat difficult because obviously the parties' interests may well diverge significantly on the point of whether the contract should stay on foot or not. In Queensland, for one party to have the exclusive right to waive, then that party will have to have the exclusive or at least the primary benefit of the condition. Case law is a bit divergent here between the states on this issue, but in Queensland, if you're going to give one party the right to waive a special condition, they're going to have the exclusive or at least primary benefit of the condition. We're a little more generous than perhaps some other states. If the contract actually goes ahead and expressly states who the condition benefits, happy times, this is going to govern the situation between the parties. Messi and Evans is the authority that you need to cite for that. The text goes ahead and discusses the situation of what happens when there's an issue of waiver, but this special condition, fulfillment of the special condition, is used as a marker to calculate the settlement date. For example, as I say there on the right hand side, settlement will occur within 14 days of fulfillment of whatever this special condition is. So you have to have fulfillment of the condition to know what date it is that you're going to settle on. Doesn't that mean that that kind of provision will equally benefit both parties? And there's been some uncertainty around that. However, as I say there on the slide, if a condition is capable of a unilateral waiver by the party for which it was inserted to benefit, it doesn't lose that quality just because it's the mechanism by which the settlement date is calculated, and we have some better certainty on that now after the Associated Developers case. There is still a bit of murkiness around this concept. Have a read of the text and you should be able to flesh that out a little bit more for yourselves. Okay, what about timing and when you need to waive to have it effective? Well, if there is a date for fulfillment of the special condition, then clearly the safest route is to waive the benefit of the special condition either before or on the date for fulfillment. As we saw previously, after the date for fulfillment of a special condition, either party, either the party that the special condition was inserted to benefit, or also the other party has the right to terminate in order to get the uncertainty around the contract resolved. But what about, for example, if a buyer has a looming fulfillment date for a special condition and then it goes by and unfortunately they've missed it? What happens if they haven't waived the benefit of that special condition within time? Are they still able to say, oh, okay, sorry, but I still want to go ahead, I still want to complete, I'll waive the benefit of that now? Because, as we just said, you would think that given the date has clicked over, the other party would then have a right to terminate. So this interesting question arises: if the party still wishes to waive the benefit of the special condition, can the other party's right that sprung up to terminate then prevent them from waiving the benefit of that special condition and going ahead and completing? Because it's not really what the parties intended originally, did they, when they inserted this special condition for that party's benefit? They didn't really intend that the other party would have this ability to stop them from being able to waive the benefit of the condition. If a date is specified for fulfillment of the condition, special condition, waiver afterwards is probably going to be ineffective, especially where time's of the essence. Just kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If the clause expressly allows waiver after this time, happy days, the clause will govern the situation between the parties, although I would hazard a guess that that's probably fairly rare. If the clause is silent on the issue, then it's likely that a party's unilateral right to waive a special condition will be lost after the date for fulfillment. This is because, as we discussed earlier, the condition changes its character to benefit both parties, so that it can only really be waived by both parties with consent. And therein lies the problem, really. There is conflicting authority in this area. Messi and Evans is one that goes kind of against what Ganch and Sullivan seems to conclude. So I think the message in all of this murkiness, really, as a prudent solicitor acting on behalf of your party that has an interest in a special condition, is to keep an eye on the time frames and advise them well before the time for fulfillment of a special condition. Look, this date is looming. You need to be deciding what you are going to do. Is the special condition going to be fulfilled? If it doesn't look like it's going to be fulfilled, what's your contingency plan? Are you going to waive the benefit of the special condition and just carry on and complete the contract anyway, or are you not going to? If you look as though you're going to be relying on an ability to waive and still carry on with the contract, then you need to be very mindful that once that date for fulfillment passes, it may well be, depending on what view of matters is taken by the court, that your client has lost their ability to still waive the benefit of that contract condition and complete the contract. So that's the slightly murky position in relation to waiver after the date for fulfillment. Prudent, as I said, always to keep an eye on time there. So that is the issue of waiver, and that is the issue of special conditions. The one other thing I did just want to briefly mention to you was that the text goes through a number of examples, the most common ones being subject to sale of another property, subject to where the contract's made, subject to registration of a plan of subdivision or other development approval, conditions that make the contract subject to finance. We've discussed those a fair bit today. Also building and pest, well, that's in the standard terms, so you should be already familiar with that. And contracts that are subject to foreign investment and review board approval. I don't have time in this video series to go through all of these examples, but really they are just iterations that play out the general principles that we've discussed today. So that was really the intent of this video series, was to get your head around the general principles that run underneath the whole issue of special conditions, so that when you come up against these examples in the text, you can just see how each of these different examples play out the general principles that we've been discussing in slightly different ways. So that is the issue of special conditions. As I always say, please don't hesitate to chat with me about it. Send me an email, send me a tweet, give me a call. Other than that, I look forward to chatting with you in a Zoom sometime soon. And other than that, it's bye for now, guys.